felt like I was possessed by it when I wrote it. And I remember my ex-boyfriend, like I wrote the whole thing in like 7 weeks and just wrote 24 hours a day. And I remember my ex-boyfriend coming into the room and I would look up at him and he would go, whoa.
Really?
Eileen's in the house, and walk back out because I was just like completely in it, and then I definitely saw it on her.
But what was he like? Well, we can go back. I mean, where'd you grow up?
I grew up all over the world before I was 6 or 5.
Because your dad was in the military.
Yeah. And so I grew up all over the place. And then we ended up in Kansas, at the University of Kansas, where my mother started putting herself through school. And so then I sort of lived in Kansas till the middle of high school, but we left all the time. So we would I spent every summer in Mississippi. And
why those places?
My grandparents lived in Mississippi. And then I lived for 8 months or something in Long Island. So I kind of lived in Kansas for a long time, and I kind of stayed very connected. Yeah.
Who's in Long Island?
My cousins, my aunt and uncle and cousin.
Jews?
No, I wish. No, I don't wish. They're wonderful people. No, I'm just saying I've always felt so confused that I'm not Jewish.
Really? Just because?
Just because all my friends are Jewish and I'm just like, I don't understand. I thought when I did my DNA, it would definitely come out that I was Jewish. And I was like, no, I'm not Jewish. It's so crazy.
Nothing. No Jew in there.
No, nothing. Exactly.
So your dad was from Mississippi?
No, my grandparents were also in the military. So they had gone into shipbuilding by that time and ended up in Mississippi. They're from New York. So I was visiting them and my father had passed away. Yeah.
But he didn't die in a war.
He died in a plane crash.
Yeah.
Doing simulated battle.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
How old were you?
7.
7.
Yeah.
In a plane crash. That must have, I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
What that
It's
did.
definitely the definitive experience of my life.
What's the worst way to, it's the worst thing because you have these, all you do is like have these images of possibilities of fiery horribleness.
And can I tell you, at 7, the confusion of just as you're like, you're first of all, you write your entire identity based on your experiences. So you're like, I am a person who always, so to get that where it's like, oh, you didn't even know that could happen. And now it's like, oh no, the person you want to see the most, you'll never see them again, and then the world is trying to give you these messages of like, you can dream anything, you can have anything. And I'm like, well, I want my dad back. No, never that.
Except that.
Yeah.
But your mom must have been a great mother.
Yeah. Thank you. She's a great mother. She's a great mother.
Because, I mean, you can like, I think that you could have ended up with borderline personality disorder or something crazy if you didn't have the great mother, I'm assuming.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I really did have a great mother. And the interesting thing that also was true about it was I'm a pretty spiritual person. I don't believe in any specific religion or anything, but I've always been very open-minded about all the things in the world. So I think in my head, I turned him into the perfect father who was with me all the time. And so in the weirdest way, I had a father who thought I was amazing. He never yelled at me, never told me what to do, and so I sort of, I turned him into...
So he's looking over you.
Exactly. So I think in this weird way, I ended up being even more nurtured by my own imagination.
But that's sort of interesting to me in that, because there is an element of that at some point we have to self-parent. And if you have shitty parents, when you're too young to know it, you kind of put in place a self-parent that's bad. Yeah. But because of your situation, you were like, your self-parent was your actual parent.
Yeah.
Based on what you knew of him. Yeah. And he was great.
And he was a fighter pilot and he was cool and he like awesome and he flew jets over, it's like all these things.
Do you remember him?
Oh yeah. Yeah, very well. I was so, maybe it's the opposite sex parent thing, but I also think I'm a lot like him. I was very, very, very fixated on him as a kid. So it was, I remember all kinds of things.
But not now, even though you have 2 movies with a fighter pilot in it?
Exactly. No, that's what I'm saying. That's the funny thing is I'm like, you want to go to my well? Drop right in.
Do you have siblings?
Yeah, I have a sister, but she had a different father.
Oh, okay. And your mom's a teacher?
No, my mom is an environmental scientist.
Oh my God. She must be panicking.
She's been panicking my entire life. And it is so depressing. I was just talking to her about it because she was at the EPA and her boyfriend was the person who reported about climate change to the White House and different places.
To the monster?
And she would know back in the 70s and the 80s. And so she was just lamenting how she's like, this is what we were trying to say. We were trying to say. And apparently like Ford and Jimmy Carter, like there were a few people who really heard it, but then, everything that has happened since, it's like, she was like, yeah, I know. She's been telling me about all these things my whole life. And it drove me up the wall and I hated it, where she's like, don't the plastic and the PCBs and this, my entire organic and don't eat the genetically modified things. Right. And now you're like, well, here we are. The
sky's on fire. Yeah.
All the chickens came home to roost.
Yeah. It's a mess. Now, do you heed her advice? Do you eat better? Do you?
I do. I eat pretty well. And I'm that irritating mom, by the way. My mom is like, my son is like, Jesus Christ, Mom.
I'm just trying to have a life. Now no one can leave their house.
Exactly. Totally.
So when did you start getting involved with wanting to express yourself as an artist person?
I think immediately, as soon as that was an option, it was both like the people that I was identifying with were kind of, I was in the punk scene and the hardcore scene. And so we were all
in Kansas?
In Kansas. Yeah. And in DC.
In DC too?
There was the most amazing scene in the world happened in Kansas. I wish I could tell this story one day, but I was in Lawrence, Kansas, and there was this little place where you could have shows called the Outhouse. So starting in like 82, 83, 84, they started having these tiny shows, but every band that was driving across the country had nowhere to go but the Outhouse.
Right. So that's the way punk worked.
I know. I saw everyone. We just did it. There was not a show you would miss. You would go to every single show. My sister was a punk rocker first. You'd go to every show. So when I look back at the shows that I saw, and then Henry Rollins would be at the restaurant the next day and sleeping at your friend's house.
Right. That's how the network worked.
Exactly. It was so amazing. So I feel like so lucky. And then I actually also interestingly witnessed that when I first started going to shows, it was kind of just weird misfits, and it wasn't really about the look. It was like a skateboarder and the person who's from India. It's like every outsider, Right,
just not mainstream, not high school culture.
No, and then I watched in front of my eyes it morph into a bigger and bigger scene, and now there's the long hairs and the straight edge and the skinheads and the fights and the violence and the guns and the drugs, and right when I left. I was friends with all these guys who were stealing credit card numbers and buying guns with them. And then boom, I left and they went to jail and shot each other. And it just it's just so sad.
You got out from under the wire. Got out under the wire before the drugs and the guns ruined everything. But what you saw, the Minutemen and
many times.
Oh, really?
Many times, yeah.
X
and my
everybody.
Favorite show, and I can't remember what year it was, if it was 85 or 84 or 86, but the best show I ever saw was the Bad Brains in the rain. And I think the lineup was, I can't find the exact thing, but I think the lineup was that it was the Red Hot Chili Peppers opening for Fishbone, opening for Bad Brains. So you think about the flip, the biggest band was the Bad Brains. And it was 20 people because it was raining. And so it was, when I think back, and by the way, the Bad Brains was the band that blew my mind.
Yeah, they are definitely mind blowers. Yeah.
That, because the music was not that great leading up to the Bad Brains, and the Bad Brains suddenly was just I didn't even know this was possible. It's such tight, amazing music.
So you were
I saw all those guys,
and you're right up close. Your timing was correct.
Oh, it was wonderful.
Did you know? Was William Burroughs in Kansas by that time?
He was.
Was he? Did he show up at the club sometimes?
No, he never showed up there. But my first job in film was, my mom was kind of hip to all this stuff, of course, because Burroughs was there. And it's great that you know that. So he did this thing called the River City Reunion, where he brought all the beat poets to
all the old men. University. He brought all the old guys.
All of them.
Ferlinghetti and Ginsberg and Corso.
All of them. Yeah. So my mom was friends with the documentary filmmaker, Marc Kaplan, who was going to make a documentary about it. Yeah. And she made me be his PA. And I was I had no idea these people were really famous. I really was ugh, whatever. My mom's generation.
What's
whatever.
with these old guys?
So my first job was when I was about 14
Yeah.
or 13, and I was his PA, and he ended up assigning me to Allen Ginsberg, who I had to follow around Allen Ginsberg.
He was disappointed you weren't a boy.
Oh, yes, he was. And it's funny because somebody asked William Burroughs's, partner of many, many years about me at some point because they heard the story.
The guy who took care of him? What was his name?
What's his name? I know it too.
Or Braunhaller. It's a German name. Oh, man.
I remember. And he said something about like, I never even met her. I never saw her. And I'm like, no, I know you guys didn't see me, but I was standing right there. I was invisible to all you guys. But there's actually a postcard at City Lights bookstore of Keith Haring drawing this like obscene drawing on the ground, and Allen Ginsberg standing and talking to him. And I have a mohawk and I'm standing right behind them in this postcard.
Yeah.
It's like one of my favorite little mementos.
That's great.
But yeah, it was great. It was great. It was fun. And it's amazing to think I was like living in Kansas, and I had just met Matt Dillon, who was filming a thing for Kansas, and he was super pissed off at me about something. So I'm standing with those guys and trying to duck Matt Dillon because he thinks I've stolen $100 from him.
What?
And, like, to think that's all going down in Kansas is so hilarious.
What was Matt Dillon doing there? Was he part of it?
He was filming a movie called Kansas. So the theater where the Beatnik experience is happening is catty corner to the hotel that Matt Dillon's staying in. And Matt, who's gone on to be a very good friend of mine now for many years. But Matt, because I was a punk rocker, he would always come up to me to try to figure out where the shows were at. The things were going on. So I knew him, and then he dropped $100 and I took it and I didn't give it back to him. And then he found out and he was very angry with me. And this is a joke we still have to this day.
The $100 joke?
You owe me $100.
So in essence, the Beatniks are responsible for your first job in movies.
Yes, totally true.
Because of your mom. And you got to see old William Burroughs up close, and Allen and all those guys. It's weird because like all the punk rockers owe William certainly a debt of gratitude for blowing something open.
Yeah, I know. Grauerholtz, James Grauerholtz.
That's it, Grauerholtz.
Yep.
That's right. Thank God. Did you look it up or you just remembered?
No, I just remembered.
God,
I know
that's great.
I know his name so well.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. He sort of took care of him.
Yeah, really did.
Well, then, so that's a hell of a baptism into the world of art.
Yeah, so I didn't totally answer your question, but what it was that's what we all were doing. We're making flyers, we're taking photographs, we're in bands, and I tried I did all those things. I was in a band, did this, all of those things.
What'd you do in a band? Sing?
I did so badly that it didn't last long.
Yeah.
But that's what it was. What was interesting was I was so drawn to the arts like a moth to the flame, but I was also capable of having self-awareness to be like, I'm not so good at that. That's not so good. Literally from the moment I was in junior high and started doing that stuff all the way up until I went to painting school at Cooper Union and had figured out that I wanted to be in the fine arts and figured out that Cooper Union was my favorite school in the world and where I was dying to go, and got in there. And it was only once I got in there that I took a film course and like my head just exploded. But
it's interesting that the sort of punk idea, the punk aesthetic really engaged all possibilities, right? Because you were printing, you were doing paintings, you could do silk screens, you could do music. Like if there's any kind of like guerrilla education to all the arts, it's that. Photography.
Totally.
Right.
Doing crazy hair things. You're making your own clothing. It's such a hotbed for creativity.
How'd you land on painting?
I think it's weird because I actually had a really extensive education in obscure film because my mom's a film buff and the university had this theater where they played great European and obscure films all the time.
What was the one movie that like kind of blew your mind during the punk period where you realized like, oh, there's weird movies out there?
Oh my God. I got really, it's funny. I got really into Ken Russell at one point.
Oh,
and he's making like Lair of the White Worm and Salome's Last Dance. And so the weirder, the better for me.
Didn't he do Altered States eventually? Did Ken Russell? I know the Lair of the White Worm.
He might have. Gothic, I remember loving. Anyway, I just loved all those weird films.
Yeah.
But yet somehow when you're living in the Midwest, nobody ever tells you could be a filmmaker. It was. And sometimes people will ask me now, like, when did you decide you wanted to be a director? I'm like, I still don't want to be a director. I couldn't care less about being a director. I just want to make cool films.
Yeah, right.
I never saw the role of a director and wanted to be it. I just want to make I just wanted to make the films I see in my head,
Right.
And so that was it. I'm very emotional